is in a May 4th memorial. This is kind of creepy. Look at this.
Today, the Guardsmen opened fire on the students, killing 4 of them, 2 young men and 2 young women. 3 were shot in the chest and 1 in the head. A dozen or more others were wounded, some by gunfire and some by nails. The university is closed and all faculty and students have been sent home. The students were protesting the American invasion of Cambodia.
On Monday morning, May 4th, Kent State students make their way to class as usual. What is not usual is the presence of Ohio National Guardsmen stationed around the campus.
Got tissues for people that might
The
be
mayor
crying
of
this.
Kent called the Guard into the area, and they first appeared on campus on Saturday night when the ROTC building burned.
As soon as we got on campus, everything was different. There's a tank sitting in front of the library. How many people go to class and see a tank sitting in front of their classroom?
Like Tom
At
Cruise.
11 a.m., students are heading toward the Commons, the hub of campus, as is typical. But many are going to attend a rally that had been called for 3 days earlier on May 1st. Some stop, some move on. Across the Commons at the ROTC site, the number of guardsmen is now 113. General Canterbury, who arrived at the scene in civilian clothing, takes charge.
And the order came down to lock and load, fix bayonets, and prepare to use gas. I issued that order to my men.
Guard officers have already decided to disperse the rally.
It wasn't a feeling of danger or ominous or impending catastrophe.
At the rally, students are conscious of their First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and freedom of assembly. They gather around the Victory Bell to express their opposition to Nixon's expansion of the Vietnam War, and now to something closer to home, the presence of 850 soldiers on their campus.
It's my campus. I have a right to be here. I felt like we've been invaded.
Anti-war and anti-guard chants emerge in spurts of protest.
I actually stood up on that brick structure and tried to call for a student strike.
A jeep circles the space on the Commons 3 times. A police officer tells students to leave the area.
Leave this area immediately.
Several rocks are thrown in the direction of the jeep. One rock bounces off the jeep's tire.
We didn't think that anybody had the right to tell us that we couldn't stand there in a group.
There was no riot. There was peaceful protest taking place.
Guardsmen launched tear gas from the line at the ROTC site and began marching toward the protesters. A brisk wind blows cool air across the Commons, dispersing much of the gas in the open space. A few protesters pick up canisters and throw them back. Some in the crowd are affected by the tear gas. Others walk out of its path to avoid it.
A tear gas canister landed right at my feet. and I got a big whiff of tear gas and went into one of the nearby dormitories to catch my breath.
Halfway across the commons, the guardsmen split into two groups. Company C, with 1/3 of the guardsmen, heads towards the Prentice Hall side of Taylor Hall. They take up positions there, blocking re-entry to the commons. Company A and Troop G, comprised of 75 guardsmen and officers, make their way up and over Blanket Hill, dispersing the retreating students. They stop down on the practice field where General Canterbury and Lieutenant Colonel Fassinger assess the situation. Some rocks are thrown at guardsmen. Some guardsmen throw rocks. Around 12:10 p.m., about a dozen guardsmen from Troop G are ordered to kneel and aim their weapons as a show of force at a dozen vocal demonstrators in the parking lot, some 150 to 200 feet away.
Nobody quite knew what to make of that. Speaking for myself and for Allison, we had no conception that there were bullets in those rifles.
I was waving a black flag of protest, and I was shouting at the guard, and I saw some of them then begin to kneel and aim in our direction. Fortunately for me, they didn't fire at that moment.
Guard officers, including General Canterbury and Lieutenant Colonel Fassinger, confer in a huddle at the far end of the field. Then the guardsmen begin to leave their position on the practice field and move back in the same direction from which they came. To those students observing them, this movement appears to signal a retreat. As they march uphill, members of Troop G look back toward the parking lot.
It seemed to many people that we had accomplished our purpose of having gone out, demonstrated against their presence. And even though they broke up our demonstration, now they were leaving.
The guardsmen suddenly turn in unison and level their guns in the same direction.
And at this point, things started changing. It's like a film playing in slow motion for me.
Guard officers stop the firing. The unit turns and marches back toward the commons. Shock waves of disbelief, anguish, and grief emanate from the students. They are left on their own to care for their classmates who lie dead, dying, and wounded.
Soon it was interrupted by a moan here or a cry there, and then all of a sudden, just like this scream of horror in unison as it finally hit us. They'd shot us.
Students begin to move back to the commons to protest the shooting by the guard. When the guard makes clear that protesters must move from the Victory Bell, students stage a sit-in on a slope along the side of the commons. Guardsmen are positioned above and below the sit-in. Faculty Marshal Glenn Frank intervenes with guard officers to prevent another troop advance.
Sir, you've got a couple hundred students there who might get hurt.
Are you all right?
Can we try to move them out first? Can we try to move them out? Would you give us a chance? How long will you give us?
Frank then makes an anguished plea to students to convince them that if they do not leave, they will be shot too.
Please listen to me right now. Wait a minute, wait a minute. I am begging you right will disperse right now. They're going to move in, and it can only be a slaughter. Jesus Christ, I don't want to be a part of this. Please, I'm begging you also. Follow me on this way.
Today, the Guardsmen opened fire on the students, killing 4 of them, 2 young men and 2 young women. 3 were shot in the chest and 1 in the head. A dozen or more others were wounded, some by gunfire and some by bayonets. The university is closed and all faculty and students have been sent home. The students were protesting the American invasion of Cambodia.